The race for the next megajet has exploded back to life. At the 2025 Dubai Air Show, Airbus quietly dropped a bombshell. They're studying a stretched Airbus A350-2000, a jet that could finally challenge Boeing's long-delayed 777X on size, range, and economics. Boeing immediately responded with a feasibility study of its own on the 777-10, a near-absurd stretch of the 777-9 that Emirates wants to pack up with 475 passengers. Two manufacturers, two monster twin jets, one shrinking market segment. Which one survives, and which one actually launches, and which one becomes the world's new long-haul king? Let's dive into it. Imagine the world's biggest airline staring down a crisis. More passengers than ever, but no new giant airliners to carry them. The Airbus A380 is gone and the 747 is a museum piece. The airlines of the world are asking, what's new? For the first time in more than a decade, the upper end of the twin-engine market is finally heating up again. And surprisingly, it isn't the long-delayed Boeing 777X that's triggered the momentum, it's actually the airlines. As I said at the beginning of the video, at the 2025 Dubai Air Show, Airbus confirmed that they're actively studying a larger, more powerful version of the Airbus A350. The CEO of Airbus's commercial aircraft division put it bluntly. Carriers are telling Airbus that they want competition in the large capacity market. After years of watching Boeing enjoy a near monopoly in the 400-seat twin jet category, airlines are now pushing the European manufacturer to build something bigger, something longer, and something more competitive. Internally, Airbus has been looking at a stretch of roughly 4 additional rows, about 40 more seats beyond today's Airbus A350-1000. Now, that might not sound radical to those sitting in the audience, but in the world of aircraft design, adding even a few meters to a fuselage can kick off a cascade of engineering changes. This proposed variant, often referred to in industry circles as the Airbus A350-2000, or simply the Airbus A350 stretch, would become Airbus's first genuine challenger to the Boeing 777-9 in terms of raw passenger volume. And behind the scenes, Airbus engineers are evaluating everything from landing gear reinforcement to cabin floor load limits, and to whether or not the wing, the most expensive part of the Airbus A350, has enough margin to support the higher takeoff weight. Of course, none of this is confirmed and none of it is guaranteed, but the fact that Airbus is publicly admitting that they're studying such a large aircraft and that the project is alive again, it's a major shift in tone. For years, they shelved the idea, citing the need to stabilize production of the existing Airbus A350 and also downscale the Airbus A380. But now, the demand is too loud to ignore. And Boeing has heard every word of it. Buried inside Emirates' massive follow-on order for 65 more 777-9s was a very interesting clause. Boeing agreed to perform a full technical feasibility study on an even larger derivative, the 777-10. This would be the largest twin-engine aircraft ever conceived, a stretched 777-X with seating so dense that it starts to approach the early Airbus A380 layout. Emirates, unsurprisingly, is pushing Boeing hard. They want a 2-class configuration in the 460 to 475 seat range, far above the numbers floated in early Boeing modeling. To achieve that, the 777-10 would need to grow roughly by 16 feet, around 5 meters, making it an absurdly long aircraft, longer than anything flying today apart from a fully loaded cargo 747-8. So technically Boeing can do it. But that extra length creates headaches. Even if the wingspan remains Code F compliant, the fuselage itself becomes so long that some airports may struggle with gate clearance, pushback angles, and taxiway geometry. And the real challenge, the one that Boeing is spending the most of its effort on, isn't the airport stand, it's the takeoff. A twin-engine aircraft this large pushes right up against the limits of certification. Regulators require a jet to safely take off, climb, and clear obstacles, even if one of the engine fails at the worst possible moment. For a 777-10 loaded with nearly 500 people, that becomes an enormous task. Can the GE9X engines generate enough of a thrust margin? Can the aircraft still meet the climb-out performance? And what about the runway length requirements? Do certain airports now become unusable that could take the small version of that plane? The engineers need to do a deep dive analysis into this airframe to see if single-engine version of this aircraft can exist. If they could make it work, the 777-10 becomes the undisputed king of capacity. But if they can't, it becomes a niche curiosity, a paper aeroplane optimized exclusively for Emirates. Now, doesn't that sound familiar like a certain other large aircraft? Before we look at the future of the Airbus A350-2000 and the speculative 777-10, it's worth understanding the two giants that already anchor this part of the market, the -1000 Airbus A350 and the -9 777. Airbus's flagship twin-engine jet today is that Airbus A350-1000, a long, elegant machine that typically seats up to 370 passengers depending on the configuration. It's built around a modern carbon fiber fuselage, a high-efficiency wing, a pair of Rolls-Royce Trent XWB engines, and it's already flying and flying well. Airlines praise its fuel burn, its cabin comfort, and its reliability, and Airbus has been steadily leveraging its existing platform into new niches. Qantas's ambitious Project Sunrise, the ultra-long-range flights from Australia to London and New York, will use a modified version of the Airbus A350-1000 as its base airframe. Airbus is also building the Airbus A350 freighter off the same platform, demonstrating just how much performance margin is baked into the design. In short, the Airbus A350-1000 is a mature aircraft with proven economics, a lightweight structure, and room to grow. It has the capacity to become a -2000 model. But on the other side of the ring stands Boeing's much-hyped, but still uncertain, 777-9. This is the first member of the next generation of the 777X family, and on paper it targets close to 400 seats, making it the spiritual successor to the 777-300ER. Boeing markets the aircraft as offering unrivaled economics thanks to its massive GE9X engines, the most powerful and efficient turbofans ever built, and an advanced composite folding wing that gives it both long wingspan efficiency and airport-friendly ground handling. But the -9 has been plagued by delays. Originally expected to enter service in 2020, you should be able to watch this video right now on the plane, but it slipped year after year due to certification changes and manufacturing challenges. As of this year, it's still not certified, yet despite this, Emirates, the largest operator of the 777 series, continues to double down with their orders. Their decision to place more orders at the Dubai Air Show is a massive vote of confidence, suggesting that the aircraft's long-term promise outweighs its troubled development. Together with the Airbus A350-1000 and the 777-9, this defines the current top tier of twin-engine widebodies. Airbus is lighter and more modern materials and efficient and already operational, but Boeing is bigger, more powerful, and pushing the upper limits of what a twin-engine jet can be. The battle between their stretched derivatives will build directly on this foundation, with Airbus offering refinement and efficiency and the other one offering sheer scale. So let's talk about the Airbus A350-2000. The idea isn't new. Airbus has looked at a -2000 model since the early 2010s, but they shelved it before the pandemic to focus on the -900 and the -1000. And that freighter. Engineers have also studied several other possible strength lengths over the years, including a shrink to a -800, along with structural changes that they would need to do to get this, such as reinforced landing gears, higher weight maximum takeoff weights, and possible strengthening parts of the wing. At Dubai 2025, Airbus finally confirmed that the stretch is back under active study. The CEO of Airbus Commercial Operations said that airlines are openly asking for more competition into the market and want to know about a stretch that could add 40 more seats over the -2000. This, of course, would be Airbus's first real direct rival to the Boeing 777-X, and carriers like Emirates are encouraging Airbus to please look at stretching it, especially at slot-restricted hubs. Now, this is just a side note, but you gotta wonder why Airbus was asking for this. Maybe they don't exactly 100% believe in Boeing's ability to bring that 777-10 to the market, but I also think that if Airbus is offering the -2000, they can use that to negotiate a cheaper price for their eventual fleet replacement of getting rid of their existing 777s, the -300ER models, and also their aging fleet of Airbus A380s. I just think it's a little bit too much of a coincidence that Emirates is sniffing around Airbus asking for a competition to the one sort of planes that they just ordered. Of course, now Airbus is also assessing the trade-offs. Cargo volume impacts, the thrust margin from the Trent engines, and the internal load distribution, and how much structural margin actually exists in the current Airbus A350 airframe. And there's also a lot of industry speculation that a well-executed -2000 could seriously threaten the 777X and maybe even kill it, because the Airbus A350 platform is lighter and more efficient to begin with. But Airbus is being extremely cautious. Insiders have warned that Airbus doesn't want more product complexity until its supply chain stabilizes. They also don't want to disrupt the -1000, which is selling well, and Airbus already has its other major commitments to that product line. Of course, the -1000 ultra long range for Project Sunrise, the Airbus A350 freighter, and long-term work on the Airbus A320 successor, with key engine decisions coming around 2027. Officially, Airbus says a stretched Airbus A350 is a long-term option with no timeline, especially with these other 3 new version aircraft that they need to get out before then. Meanwhile, Boeing is studying the 777-10 because Emirates asked for it in their massive new 777-9 order. The -10 would be a further stretch of the 777X, about 16 feet longer, targeting more than 50 extra seats, with Emirates pushing Boeing towards a 475-seat 2-class layout. That's an enormous aircraft by twin jet standards. But the engineering challenges are just as big. The entire feasibility study is focused on takeoff performance and engine out certification. Boeing has to prove that a twin this large can still meet the one engine out takeoff and climb requirements at extreme weights. Part of this question is whether or not the GE9X has enough margin for a heavier -10. There's also the questions of airport compatibility. Even with Code F wingspan, a fuselage that long may cause gate and taxiway issues. But from a market perspective, Boeing sees a replacement demand of a little over 1,000 aircraft in the 350-seat and up category, mostly from retiring existing 777-300ERs and Airbus A380s, like I mentioned with Emirates. But analysts warn that a -10 could be too specialized, appealing only to Emirates and a handful of other carriers, like for example Qantas, making this a risky investment. There's also a side story I need to mention, the Airbus A350neo concept. Around 2019, Airbus explored the idea with engine makers, targeting improved fuel burn and aerodynamic upgrades. Airlines would have loved it, but the timing was wrong. The Airbus A350 family was still young at the time and orders were strong, until COVID hit, and then Airbus didn't want to undermine the existing -900 and -1000 orders. The Airbus A350neo remains a real concept, but it's not an active program because it will only cannibalize their own market. But if Boeing and Airbus both commit to these stretches, the comparison becomes pretty straightforward. The -2000 would be the lighter, more efficient option, but it would also need reinforced gear, more thrust, and might sacrifice some belly cargo capacity depending on how the structure is modified. The -10 would actually offer more maximum seats, brute force capacity, but it would face tougher certification hurdles, higher structural weight, and more airport limitations, so it will cost more to operate. Emirates does also add an additional wrinkle. Now, I do also need to mention the little caveat with Emirates. Emirates had previously rejected the Airbus A350-1000 because the engines in the hot Gulf conditions didn't work as well as the -900 aircraft. Rolls-Royce is now working on upgrades, but any stretched Airbus A350 will depend heavily on how those engines hold up in high-temperature environments, so it might mean that Emirates would never be able to even order the -2000. So if you're talking about a specialized market and you take away the one airline that would be the biggest customer, now the Dash 2000 is not making a lot of sense at all. So the choice for airlines becomes simple on paper but complicated in practice. Do you pick the absolute highest seat count like the Dash 10 for dense trunk routes and slot-constrained hubs, or do you choose a slightly smaller, more flexible, more efficient giant like the Airbus A350-2000? And quietly, in the background, Airbus is waiting to see how far Boeing pushes the Dash 10 before they lock in their own size of their own stretch. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments.